and walking. Equity is always at the forefront of our work. In the Mid-Atlantic region, we work with local communities in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, providing technical assistance to safe routes to school programs and coordinators, and promote policy development and finance structures that encourage safe walking and bicycling opportunities. A few housekeeping items in GoToWebinar. On the left is the GoToWebinar viewer, where you'll see today's presentation. To the right is the control panel where you can raise your hand, ask questions, and select your audio mode. Please note that the control panel will automatically collapse when not in use. If you want to have it open at all times, just click the View menu and uncheck Auto Hide Control Panel. There are two ways to listen to us today, either through your telephone or mic and speakers. If you're having issues with one option, I encourage you to try the other one. If you're still having issues, just send us a chat message and we'll try our best to field those issues. Everyone is on mute today, but we definitely want to get your input. You can use the questions box to ask the speaker questions for the Q&A portion at any time during the webinar. We'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can at the end of this session. I also want to let you know that we'll have a recording of this webinar on our regional website in case you want to refer to it later as you're putting together your applications or if you want to share with colleagues. Just visit www.saferoutesgreaterwashington.org to access the webinar. It should be available within the next 48 hours. Now that we've concluded the administrative portion of this introduction, let's take a look at the facts. Today, fewer children are walking and biking and more parents are driving their children to school. That's an unfortunate fact. Only a generation ago, children routinely traveled around their neighborhoods either on foot or on bike. Walking and bicycling were common ways to get to and from school. Today, few children walk or bike. And as traffic increases, parents become even more convinced that it is unsafe for their children to walk. They begin driving their children to school, thereby adding even more cars to the morning chaos and increasing the opportunities for dangerous interactions between pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. In the same time period, kids have become less healthy. Childhood obesity rose from 4 to 35%. This is the first generation of kids that may not live as long as their parents. Chronic diseases, such as diabetes, are seen in kids now more than ever. So promoting walking and biking to school is an ideal strategy to increase physical activity and health among children. But we only want to do it if it's safe. And that's where Safe Routes to School programs come in. Many studies have shown that kids who walk and bike to school get more physical activity, are fitter, and have lower BMIs. Walking a mile to and from school each day equals 2/3 of the recommended 60 minutes of daily physical activity. Not only that, but kids who walk and bike to school tend to be more active throughout the day. Studies across multiple states have also shown a 35 to 45% increase in walking and biking as a result of Safe Routes to School programs. Other studies from the past 2 years show a 45 to 75% reduction in all pedestrian injuries near schools that have implemented Safe Routes to School programs, thereby showing that these programs, the benefit of these programs extend to the entire community. Newer studies are also delving into the economic benefits of Safe Routes to School programs. One study showed long-term savings on healthcare costs due to injury prevention, and another documented that the busing and driving of kids who live close to school costs somewhere between $800 million to $1.2 billion each year. Just think of how we could use these funds for family, school, and health programs. The opportunity to bike and walk to school offers a solution to an array of concerns about traffic safety, traffic congestion, transportation costs, air pollution, and lack of physical activity. At the same time, walking and bicycling to school provides an opportunity for children to build independence. Yet, despite the many benefits of Safe Routes to School programs, the application for federal and state funds for the implementation of these programs can be a daunting and at times deterrent endeavor for many communities. And that's why we're here today. To break down the process, answer many of the questions we traditionally receive from communities in Maryland embarking on the solicitation of funds, and provide some insights into what makes solid applications for funding. To guide us through this process, we are very fortunate to have with us today Jessica Shear. Jessica is a Senior Transportation Planner at Wallace Montgomery. In this position, she is responsible for NEPA studies, multimodal planning projects, and support for regional planning efforts. Prior to joining Wallace Montgomery, Jessica worked with the Maryland Department of Transportation, State Highway Administration, where she served as Assistant Division Chief for the Regional and Intermodal Planning Division. In that capacity, Jessica managed various federal funding programs for SHA, including the Transportation Alternatives Program, Safe Routes to School Program, and Federal Lands Access Program, among others. So we're in very capable hands today. Now I'll turn it over to Jessica for today's presentation.
Oh, I'm going to share screen. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So today I've been asked to go through the Safe Routes to School program. I'll cover some general information, and then I'll get into more detail that will hopefully help you all apply successfully for funding this year for the program. So this is a federal funded program, and in Maryland they get approximately $10 million a year. There's a 20% cash match requirement, a non-federal cash match requirement. In some instances, in-kind match is allowed, but I suggest that you confirm with the project manager or the program manager prior to submitting your application to verify what you're intending to use as in-kind match is acceptable and would be accepted for the project. You must benefit an elementary or middle school and have a school participation. So it can be one school or it could be a group of schools. It depends on what your project is intending to accomplish. It must be within 2-mile radius of the school that is participating. And in Maryland, if you were to map that out, that pretty much covers the majority of the state. So there's a lot of opportunity there no matter where you're currently located. It is a program that is currently administered through the State Highway Administration. Project sponsors that are eligible are the local government entities, school districts, and schools, as well as the rest of the ones listed here, including nonprofit entities, but these must be responsible for the administration of local transportation safety programs, such as involvement with the Safe Routes to School program, or programs that implement planning, design, and construction of projects that improve safe routes for for children and adults. Here we have listed a list of potential partners from public entities that you could reach out to help you with your project. This could be from a funding perspective or from an administrative perspective. The more people you're able to collaborate with and partner, the more successful your program is likely to be. So this could be the state police, who often receive funding for safety programs and objectives that they'd like to accomplish, as well as local government entities, Department of Education, and State Highway Administration, among others. So these are agencies and folks that you should reach out to, whether they are able to provide you funding or, like I said, assistance, but also, for instance, the State Highway Administration is able to provide you some handouts or giveaways because they do have safety campaigns that they are regularly administering. So there's different ways these agencies can be of assistance. Some potential partners from a private perspective are different advocacy groups, AAA, which has a program, Auto to Auto, which I'll go over shortly, as well as some other entities such as the League of American Bicyclists. And you could also reach out to corporations and businesses to look for them to donate cash, prizes, or other donations. I suggest that you ask them about community giving programs so they can also assist you with matching some of your funding, as well as giveaways and events, things to give out during those activities. So this is a slide that goes over Federal Highways funding apportionment. This isn't necessarily exactly down to the penny of what state highway has available, depending on what they've programmed prior years and have expended. There may be a little bit more available or less. But overall, this is available on the Federal Highway website. It's the apportionment based on pursuant to Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. And so what you'll see is that overall in Maryland, Safe Routes to School is part of the Transportation Alternatives Program, which receives a little over $12 million in 2017. There is a recreational trail set aside. And then after that, the funding is split up 50-50. And 50% of that goes to 3 metropolitan planning organizations. And this is based on population. So it's the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board, and the Wilmington Area Planning Council. All get funding that they are responsible for allocating to projects which they have reviewed and determined are what they would like to fund for their funding amount. The other half is state flex money, and what that means is State Highway, with their committees, their technical and executive committee, will decide what projects will get funded with that amount of funding. So what's important to know here is if you happen to be within the Washington, Baltimore, Wilmington region, this is specific money that has to be spent in these areas. And if it is not spent, then it could be lost, or it could something called lapse, which means the federal government could take it back, or State Highway could move it to do other projects anywhere else in the state under STP funding. So it's really important that if you happen to be in one of these areas or anywhere in the state, that you're taking advantage of the opportunity to utilize this funding, because otherwise it's really an opportunity missed to make valuable improvements in your area. So right now we'll go over the 6 E's and what could be eligible under those 6 E's. So the 6 E's is, the first one is engineering. It's creating that physical environment and creating the design and constructing sidewalks and ramps, and it's that physical environment that makes it safe and comfortable for students and parents and people in the community to travel. There's an education component, which is the teaching, instructing, and developing of safety campaigns, educational materials. It's providing that lifelong biking and walking safety skills to students and their parents. There's an encouragement component of using events and activities to promote walking and biking. It's about making it fun, making it exciting, getting people interested in doing this activity. So infrastructure is creating that built environment, and that could be very broad. It could be design, implementation, operation, and maintenance of traffic control devices or physical measures. And these could be low-cost items and smaller items, or it could be very broad, large projects. And the non-infrastructure component can also be kind of low cost or large. So it could be, it depends on whether you want to focus it on an individual school or if you want to look at a county-wide or a town-wide initiative for various schools. The other 3 E's, enforcement, evaluation, and equity. Enforcement is about getting your local law enforcement involved to ensure traffic laws and having a presence around school vicinities. Evaluation is monitor and documenting outcomes and trends by collecting data so that you understand what the benefit is for your local area or your school, as well as understanding how things are changing socially, whether people are joining in and walking and biking more over time with your improvements that you're making. And the last one is equity, and this is about addressing social, economic, and political differences that result in health, education, and employment disparities. More than half Latino girls are expected to get diabetes in their lifetime, and the number is almost as high for African American girls. So this is looking at addressing some of those inequalities that we have and ensuring that all students, no matter if there's low income or students with disabilities, that we're providing resources that they can all participate equally. So I'll go through those E's in more detail now, discussing eligible items as well as giving you some ideas of things that you could initiate, whether you're kind of just getting started and a little overwhelmed with all the opportunities and different things that you could do, or whether you already have a grasp and you've been submitting applications and you've already been participating in the program. There's just some different suggestions and ideas to kind of get your wheels turning. So first I'll talk about the eligible engineering activities. And again, this is about the built environment. This is about developing, design, and constructing of sidewalks, ramps, curbs, your crosswalks, putting countdown signals up, even developing shared use trails, signage, and things of that nature. It could also be purchasing and installing bike racks and skateboard racks to make it safe for students that bring their bikes to school to keep them there and keep them safe. So some ideas for engineering efforts. I have kind of a beginner, intermediate, and advanced take on all of these slides. And again, because there is so many opportunities and there's so many people to partner with, whether there's environmental interest, health interest, or a safety component, there's a lot of ways you could go and a lot of different opportunities for you. So if you're just beginning, some ideas for you is to host maybe the PTA meeting and get faculty and students involved and help them kind of start thinking about what are the issues and concerns they have that keep from allowing them to walk and bike to school or allowing their children to walk and bike to school. So just identifying what are those obstacles, what are those issues. Another low cost and low investment could be purchasing and installing those bike and skateboard racks just to kind of provide that utility of somewhere to put their bicycles and their skateboards and saying this is safe and we're promoting this as something that we would like the students to participate in. An intermediate opportunity is design and construction of a sidewalk segment or ADA ramp crosswalk. So this is looking at just maybe one gap in the network, one area that would be a missing component that, maybe it's to a neighborhood or the community center to school, but what is one area where you can focus? And it's kind of a medium cost, not necessarily, $1 million project. Maybe it's just a couple $100,000. It's something that's more manageable from a funding perspective, but also from a documentation perspective. Another option would be to evaluate and address parking flow, the pickup and drop-off patterns. Is there constraints between the parking, the buses parking or picking up students, and just the general walking and bicycling pedestrians? So what is that flow? Is it working well? Should it be kind of managed or different signage up? That's something that's kind of a medium great effort. And if you're more advanced and you have, engineering abilities, or you're working with the local Department of Public Works, looking at design and construction of multiple sidewalks, traffic signals, countdown. So looking at maybe a greater connection or greater network. This could be larger segments of sidewalk, and again, this would have a larger price tag to it. So it's more of a budget need there. You would have to have more match, but if you have that ability and you already know what your federal requirements are as far as the documentation, you feel that comfort level, then that's an opportunity to make a bigger connection. As well as implementing shared use paths or protected bicycle lanes. These provide a designated space for cyclists and improve safety, and parents and pedestrians feel safer when there's kind of that separation from traffic. Another option would be evaluating bus stop locations and needs, maybe an option to minimize stops that are very close to the school. That's not always available because it depends on the school and local policies, whether children are required to bus or not. But where there's that opportunity to maybe reevaluate all the stops that are needed, as Maria Annette had mentioned in her intro, that could lead to savings for the school and the local community because each stop does kind of equate to a cost. Roadway configurations could be simple treatments, or it could go to a full street reconstruction that could include sidewalks, trees, medians, and other amenities. So as you see, there's kind of the low-hanging fruit, some smaller things that you can do that are more manageable. But if you are familiar with the program, you're familiar with the requirements, then there's a greater opportunity to make some bigger changes in your network. Some eligible education activities include lesson plans, creating and reproducing educational materials and training materials, creating walking and biking school route maps that show what are the safest connections to school from local neighborhoods and activity hubs like libraries and community centers. So it's showing where the sidewalks are, where the countdown signals are, and just providing that information to parents and students to say, this is where we would suggest that this is the safest route from where you are to get to school and home. You can also use this for banners and coloring books, things to give out to children to help teach them safety skills, as well as providing parents educational materials, as they are a large component of allowing their children to walk and bike to school. So some ideas for education are working with AAA. As I mentioned, they have the Auto, which teaches children the importance of buckling up, wearing bicycle helmets, and looking all ways before crossing the street. And there's a picture of it on the right-hand corner. It's a little remote-controlled talking vehicle that they bring to your school. So if you want to do a class or an assembly, this is more geared towards smaller children, but it talks to them, it gets them interactive and practicing safe ways to walk and cross the street and things of that nature. So it's really cute, and the children love it. I've seen that in action. You know, they get to hug it, and it's just a really fun activity to help them learn appropriate skills. Other things could be purchasing books for your library to read to your classes about walking and biking safely. I think there's a book for Clifford and different books out there with things that children recognize. So there's also videos, safety and bicycle videos out there. There's a lot of things available that have already been created that other states are using, and it's not necessarily something you have to start with. So I would say for a minimal opportunity, use what's already available to you. Don't recreate the wheels. Find what's out there that you like, that meets what your needs are, that your interests are, and utilize those curriculums or videos and use that to your advantage. Some other moderate ideas for education are producing school and county mapping, as I mentioned before, showing where there's the flow of traffic, bus stops, sidewalks, and producing that to give out to the students and their parents, as well as utilizing curriculums that are available. So there's so many opportunities to incorporate walking and bicycle safety into whether it's PE, math, science, geography, or health. And these curriculums have already been developed, and you can utilize them. So that's an easy way to talk about walking speeds or creating videos that they can practice doing, like a documentary, and really encouraging them to take an interest in what their local concerns are for safety. Some advanced ideas for education are conducting bike rodeos, establishing an after-school bike club, and having a curriculum such as the Street Trust, the Neighborhood Navigators curriculum. So these are more long-term. These aren't just single activities or single events during the year. This is something that you would put more, implement more long-term and on a regular basis. And bike rodeos are about getting your children in your school to learn how to not only could potentially learn how to bike ride, but also how to bike ride safely. And an after-school bike club is a fun way to teach safe bicycling skills and cover topics such as bicycle maintenance. And again, this can become part of their daily routine and something that's long-term. This slide is an example of some of the curriculum that's available. This is supported by Maryland State Highway Administration. It was developed a few years ago and can be found on the Safe Routes to School National Center website. I have the link at the end or bottom of the slide. But there is a curriculum through kindergarten through 5 for lesson plans of walking near traffic, crossing streets. So again, this is just, there is an example of curriculum and activities that are out there. There's games and activity books there's so many things that have already been created that you can utilize to get started. Some eligible encouragement activities are incentives to get children excited about walking and bicycling over time. This could be materials, giveaways, prizes, awards, or even certificates. Walking school bus programs, things that encourage walking and biking to school day events. So participating in those events, there's annual events for both a walk to school day and a bike to school day. And you can get funding for those, whether it's just getting that event started or the materials and some giveaways that get kids that want to make them want to participate and excited about it, as well as assisting with individual or school competitions, contests, and events. So some of the contests that are available are, there's some available on, again, the National Center, Safe Routes to School National Center website, Walk and Bike Across America, and Frequent Mile programs. So those are programs that you can kind of initiate in your school and encourage. But there's also national contests out there, such as the Saris Parking 5th Grade National Poster Contest. And they create a poster, and whoever the winner is actually receives a bike and a helmet and some cool prizes for 2nd and 3rd place. So those are giveaways that you can encourage students to participate. It could be helmets, bike locks, lights, and other safety items. There's kind of a whole gamut of things that are open and could be funded through this program. Some moderate opportunities are hosting that walk and bike to school day event. That can take a little bit more planning and a little bit more funding if you want to give away things for all participants. Holding a video contest or even a bike and tennis shoe drive where you encourage people to bring in their bikes that their children no longer use, maybe they've outgrown, and then the school can use them during PE or even after school club. So just providing those resources for the school to utilize. Some advanced opportunities are a positive reward campaign. So for the children that are biking and walking regularly, you could give them a kind of a point system, or there could be a card that you kind of hole punch, and they could win free coupons. You could work with local community businesses to donate things such as kid-sized smoothies or coupons for the local card store or what have you. There are, we encourage that you work with local businesses and see what they can give you to also provide encouragement opportunities. Another opportunity is to do a school newsletter where you're giving not only positive information about safe routes to school and walking and biking to school, but you can acknowledge a student of the week or student of the month to help demonstrate healthy habits and walking and biking to school, giving them that recognition and motivation to be a good role model. Walking school bus or bike trains are also another. It takes a little bit more effort to create these. You usually need someone that's going to be very active in this, because a walking school bus is encouraging children to walk to school, but for those parents that are fearful of their children walking alone, you still would have an adult, but an adult would walk with multiple children and kind of providing that adult oversight, but still allowing them to walk to school and socialize with other children. Eligible enforcement activities are training for crossing guards, parents, and the community. So it cannot fund the paying for crossing guards, but it can fund for the training of crossing guards as well as any equipment they may need, as well as the cost for additional law enforcement and equipment needed for enforcement activities. So for drop-off and pick-up times, you can have law enforcement available and you can apply for funding for that purpose. Some ideas for enforcement include crossing guard training and equipment, so applying for safety equipment, uniforms, cones, development of training materials, maybe a pocket guide for what to do or who to call if certain situations should occur. Some other ideas would be working with your local police department. An example in Maryland is Montgomery County worked with their Department of Public Works, District Court, as well as the Department of Transportation State Highway Administration to install speed cameras. So initially they began with a $3,000 investment. It was not safe routes to school. However, they successfully installed 20 speed radar cameras and eventually implemented 6 mobile speed camera vehicles that they rotated around the county, and now that revenue feeds back into their safety initiatives. So there's that kind of program, and working with the police department to decide what, or to determine what they're focusing on and what initiatives they're working with, maybe partnering with them to do something, as well as personal safety enforcement, which is working with the local police department to have a presence there during arrival and dismissal. And that police presence can help against danger, crime, bullying, and different things that parents are concerned with when they are thinking about allowing their child to walk or bike to school. So these measures install confidence among students and parents. An advanced opportunity would be remote drop-off enforcement as an example. And what this is if you have a small area where there are a lot of children being picked up and dropped off, and you have that vehicle component with the busing and a lot of children walking and bicycling, then you could potentially have a remote drop-off area near the school that helps mitigate and move some of the traffic to a different area that is close to the school but allows more children to walk and bike to school from a short distance, and it keeps some of that vehicular traffic out of the school, the immediate school area. So this helps the students as well as improves that drop-off and pickup area. The next E would be evaluation activities. And this is about collecting and managing data, really. And so it's doing student travel tallies, verifying, how many students are walking and biking to school, conducting parent surveys, which is an opportunity to find out what are they really concerned about, what's really holding them back from allowing their students to walk and bike to school, as well as evaluation activities and worksheets. This could be working with an evaluation specialist, so hiring someone to get on board to kind of conduct some of this information and evaluate what it means for the school and how to improve the issues that come to light. So evaluation strategies could be in identifying underlying problems as well as their solutions, what changes will need to be made to improve the program, the local program, or get it started. It could also be determining if the program is having desired results. So some ideas for evaluation are conducting student tallies and parent surveys. These surveys, I would suggest utilizing existing forms that are out there and available to you. Again, not recreating the wheel, utilizing forms that are available, and determining what improvements are needed around the school. Another opportunity is incorporating additional questions and specific issues relevant locally, so not just the school community, but what locally is a problem, so a bigger picture of the area. Monitoring program activities while they're underway, so not just before and after a project is being conducted, but during, to see if there's a change in the children's participation while project and activities are going on. And finally, there's completing more comprehensive research. So this could be looking at school concerns, arrival and dismissal behaviors, local network constraints, and other roadblocks that lead to, that could decrease participation rates. So figuring out what are the bigger components that are causing an issue for more children to participate in walking and biking to school, as well as looking at district and school policies. As I mentioned earlier, there are areas that have policies that are specifically against allowing children to walk and bike to school. And is there an opportunity there if there's more of a built environment and some of the safety concerns or other concerns are addressed? Is there an opportunity there to work with the local district or school principal and Board of Education to potentially change or maybe minimize those policies that allow for more opportunity for children that are within close distance to school to walk and bike to school if they so choose, or their parents so choose. So now that I've gone over the E's and the things that are eligible and then giving some ideas, those are certainly not the only ideas. You're not limited to those. Those are just to get the wheels turning a little and start thinking about some different opportunities, whether you're new to the program or you've been working with it for many years. So now I'm going to change gears a little and talk about Maryland's program specifically and some information that's going to help you with applying to the program. So it's really important that you think about the project and program responsibilities. So the sponsor is responsible for the planning, design, procurement, and construction. You're really the one making this project happen, whether it's for infrastructure or non-infrastructure activities. You're going to be the project manager. You're going to have to do the reporting and the paperwork and the oversight. You're going to have to make sure that you're meeting federal requirements, and be acknowledging what those are ahead of time is usually valuable to you, because with federal funding are federal requirements, and that can be more cumbersome than if you were to do certain projects with county funds or state funds. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go for them, and that doesn't mean that that should hold you back, because a little bit of investment of time and funding can mean big payoff in funding awards. And ultimately, you'll be responsible for the maintenance activities for the lifespan of the project, which is usually considered about 25 years. So SHA's responsibilities are really to be there for assistance and to guide you along the way, to help you hold your hand through the process, as well as oversight. So they're administering the federal funds on behalf of Federal Highway. So they're really responsible for the oversight to make sure that you are meeting the federal requirements and to provide you that guidance. So they're going to be looking at your invoicing and approving your invoices for reimbursement. They're going to require reporting and keeping track of where your project is and what the status of your project is, as well as helping you with the environmental documents and some of the other documents that are required. And overall, they need to provide your approvals. So whether you're designing a project, they're going to be approving your plans. They need to approve your right-of-way certifications or providing you right-of-way certification. It's very important that you understand that they provide approval for your procurement. So regardless of whether it's for consulting assistance or design activities or constructing and bidding a project out, you need to get their approval in each of these steps. And I'll go through that a little bit more in a slide in the future. But they also provide approval for advertisement and construction. So just keep in mind that as you're going through the different steps of whatever type of project you have, that you should be in touch with the program manager to make sure that you have the approvals you need to move forward. You'll also be working with the State Highway Administration Federal Aid Program Division. So that's in their Office of Finance. And there's some folks there that are responsible for giving you the approval and the go-ahead, the green light, to move forward with some of these aspects. And it's very important to just keep in mind those critical milestones and those approvals that you need, because if you move forward without the approvals you need, you're going to have to start over. It's going to create an issue, and they will compromise your reimbursement of funding. So it's just better for your time to know some of that information ahead of time and be aware of it. So Maryland and State Highway Administration is working on a new application. It should be ready to roll out by the time they open their application, which I believe is April 15th to May 15th. And although the application in the past was online, this is an electronic application where you're going to be able to choose what program you want to apply to, because they are, since Safe Routes to School is part of the Transportation Alternatives Program, this is going to be a one-stop shop for various federal funding sources that they oversee. So there will be, to initiate, a drop-down box where you can select that this is a Safe Routes to School project versus a completely separate application which you've seen in the past. Another change will be there is a saving ability. You will have an application ID number. So you will be able to, if you don't get through the whole thing, if for some reason you need to stop, you need to go to a meeting, you don't have the information you need, whatever the case may be, you can save it and come back to it, which is a new option. And in general, if you're familiar with the Transportation Alternatives Program application, this will be a reduced application with less writing components. It's going to have more drop-down menus where you're going to select yes, no, and start dates. And for Safe Routes to School, it will have many of the previous sections, but they are going to look a little different because they are reorganizing the application and trying to make it easier for applicants to get through it versus having to write in a lot of the information that they were in the past. So I'm going to go through generally what sections you can expect. And as I said in the beginning, there will be an application selection screen where you're going to pick what program you're going to be applying to. After that, it'll be your general contact information. Something to keep in mind is that you will need a federal tax ID number as well as a DUNS number. So that's something that they're going to be looking for you to include. Then you'll go into the project information, and this is where you need to be very specific about your project description, whether it's infrastructure, so you're going to be building sidewalk, how many linear feet are you building, how many ADA ramps, will you have traffic signals, how many signs do you want. That's where you need to be very specific about what you're planning to do. If it's for education and encouragement, again, be very specific. What type of activities do you plan to lead? When do you want to be giving out giveaways? The more detail you have, the better. Here you also want to, and in saying that, you still need to be concise because I think there'll probably be a limit on how much you can write. But in general, they're looking for that detail. So that's where you need to put that. And they'll be looking for you to upload a project location map. And I believe you can do this just from like Google Earth, or if you have ArcGIS or GIS abilities, it could also be a map of that type. And you want it to have enough detail that they can see some streets and have an understanding of exactly where you're planning to complete, have this project. But you also want to give an idea of what's in the area. So I guess I would say just don't have it too close up that you can only see one street location, but don't have it too far away that you're covering the entire county. So somewhere in between where you have a good idea of where this project location is, and if you can, if you have the ability to highlight what schools and even community centers, after school, where parks are that they are walking to from school to the baseball field, things like that that you can highlight are beneficial just to showing that, giving that full picture and showing a comprehensive understanding of where the value is for this project. And then there will be an MPO required information. Because there are 3 MPOs that have funding that they'll be allocating, they also have questions that they would like to incorporate. So, for example, the Baltimore region, they have a question which will be something to the effect of describe motivation of project and how it advances goals and strategies of Maximize 2040, which is their a performance-based transportation plan. So it'll be something like that probably for the other 2 regions as well. And then if you're not in one of these 3 MPOs, maybe you're in a different MPO region or not in the MPO at all, there will probably be a general question which you can expect to say something to the effect of what is the value of this project, where are the benefits, so just something to keep in mind for that question. The next section will be about school information, and what you'll need is to have a general understanding of how many students are at that school or at the various schools that you will be working with. There's a project status section, and this is going to be requesting information about your design. If it's at concept level, if you have a certain amount of it complete, they'd like to know what % complete it is. And if it's not complete, if it's at concept, when do you plan to initiate those efforts? And there's going to be different drop-down boxes for signage or stormwater management. And that'll give an idea, too, as well, whether you're going to need permitting and things of that nature. There will also be information requested about consultant procurement. So if you're in design, do you already have a consultant? Not that you have to have one, but if you are utilizing one, have you already procured their assistance, or are you planning to? Where are you at with that stage? Because again, it's important that you are doing this and meeting the federal requirements. So if you haven't done so yet, you'll need to follow the federal procurement process in acquiring their services. And I would suggest that you work with the program manager or the Federal State Highways Federal Aid Program Division to verify what that process should be. But if you already have some on hand, and I know that some counties and local governments may have already selected, it may be an annual selection, then you want to verify that you've done so that in a way that meets the federal requirements so that you can utilize the folks that you already have on through your contracts. Another component will be schedule, so they'll want to know when you're going to kick off some of these activities and having an understanding of how long it'll take before you're seeing this project through to fruition, whether it's educational and activities, events, or construction and having something complete. Another section will be the right-of-way or access information. So it's important, although you may not have this information early on, the more you have, the better. And it's better for you as an applicant and also better for them to understand how much you're already aware of to really kind of gain insight as to how quickly you can move your project forward. So if you know that you have various property owners, or you don't have to deal property owners at all, that really is telling as far as how you're going to be able to move forward with your project. If you have, it's all within state highway or county owned highway, then that's great information to have. If you have 2 property owners versus 8, the more you know and the more you're able to put on here, the better. You don't have to have this information. Most people have not in the past, but it just helps you understand what you're going to have to move forward through and how many people you're going to have to get in agreement that, yes, they want a sidewalk in their front yard, or how many appraisals and things of that nature that you're going to have to conduct, or will you not have to conduct any at all. And they'll also inquire about utilities. So if you happen to already have made a call to Miss Utility or know that there's a Verizon line, the more information that you know here. It's also saying how much you've already invested in moving this project forward, and you're already aware of what some of the components that you'll need to accommodate for. So it's giving them an idea of where you are in the project status. The next section will be about cost summary information, discussing whether you want to hire a safe routes to school coordinator or have law enforcement salary. So they're going to want to know how much and how many folks are you looking to do, when the event activities are going to occur. And another very important piece is where is your cash match sources coming from and how much are you going to have, because again, you have to have the minimum of 20%. If you happen to have more than that, then you would be considered more competitive to be able to kind of have a little more skin in the game, as they say. An idea of the application review process is it's one process for you. The main thing is that you submit before May 15th. The rest of this happens after you've submitted, and it's going through the MPO review process if you are within the Washington, Baltimore, or Wilmington regions. They'll go through a review process with their selection committees and technical committees, and usually they've made a notification through their boards around July. If your project is not funded through one of those, whether it's not in one of those areas or it was in one of those areas but not selected, then your application will be reviewed through the state highway process, likely with their technical and executive committees, which is ultimately the administrator of State Highway Administration and the Secretary of Transportation making that decision. And those decisions are made usually in the late summertime, late August, and then there's usually a press release and award letters that go out in September. So the next couple slides are going to be kind of troubleshooting your application. What can make you have an effective application? How do you build an effective application? And what are some of the issues that people have come across in the past that can make you successful? And so the number one issue that I could think of was developing a reasonable and feasible budget. And what we found in the past is that people were not understanding of all the federal requirements. They're not understanding of what it means to put a sidewalk down. That means stormwater management requirements. It could mean permitting. It could mean utility relocation. So what are the components that are going to be involved when you're going to construct a project? And understanding that on a town level, on a local level, if you were doing it through your own means, that could be one cost. But if you're bringing on consultant assistance for design, you're bidding a project out, and you're having a competitive process, usually we've seen that the costs are much higher than maybe what you're expecting. And that is because of who you're bringing on board, the competitive process, but also once you have federal funding, there are other federal components that you'll need to accommodate. And so all of that is extra steps that you'll need to take and could cost additional funds. So for instance, having your environmental documentation, your National Environmental Policy Act, the State Highway will assist you with this component, but it's looking at whether do you have streams or wetlands in the area, do you need some kind of permitting, an environmental document. Are you going to have landscaping? If you're going to be putting down sidewalk or reconstructing a crosswalk or different components of the physical environment, most likely you're going to have to deal with stormwater management requirements. You're adding curb and gutter, or you're going from a closed system or an open system to a closed system, or you're going to be piping the stormwater versus not having a curb there before, then there are requirements that you'll need to meet. There's permitting that you'll need to do. So just keep those things in mind that, you know, on the county level, you might have been able to do things one way, but now with this program, you're going to have to take a couple extra steps, all of which are reimbursable, but just key to keeping in mind when you're coming up with your estimate, as well as construction oversight and material testing costs. Many people forget that to include those in their estimates or when they're putting their application together to request funding for those items, and those can be costly and time-consuming. So just keep those things in mind when you're including in your estimate, that you have a well-rounded and inclusive estimate. Consider hiring professional assistants to develop your concepts or cost estimates if you don't have that ability. Although resources and personnel are tight usually in the local government as well as the state government, it can't hurt to ask for assistance from your local Department of Public Works. If you're at a school and you're not familiar with engineering and this kind of component of a project, then perhaps they can partner with you to at least give you a thumbs up that you're on the right path, that you have a decent estimate, or also asking for a review from State Highway before submitting your final application. They're willing to look at your draft application. They're willing to talk to you about your components or your estimates. There is a team there that looks at Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, and they may be able to assist you. At one time, we had, when I was at State Highway Administration, we had looked at providing an estimator tool that might still be available. So just reaching out to make sure that you've really covered what you need to cover as far as your cost, so that you're asking for the amount you need. Because the worst thing to do is say you need $50,000, have it approved because everyone's very supportive of your project, and then it turns out you really needed $200,000. So we just want to make sure that you're going in with your best foot forward and you're asking for the funding that you need, because that's the best time to ask for it. And also another component is, and I have the website at the end of the presentation, but the State Highway Administration does have manuals available on their website. One very valuable manual that was developed for this program and other programs like it specifically is the local public agency and other subrecipient manual that can help you through all the requirements that you'll be needed. And that should be your new best friend if you're looking to apply to this program. Another component of building an effective application is having a comprehensive plan. Mostly folks will apply for engineering or they'll apply for education or encouragement, very segmented components. But if you can find a way within your comfort level to put some of them together, really the best overall way to succeed with a Safe Routes to School program is to incorporate all of the E's. So just consider adding, maybe it's the minimal effort versus the advanced effort, depending on what your comfort level is, of combining some of these components in your application. Another is establishing match funding. If you do not have the minimum 20%, it is unlikely that, and it's not clear where that's coming from, I would say that it's probably unlikely that you're going to get a second look, especially if there's other projects out there that have the funding available to them. It's very important, it's a federal requirement, to just have that information and have it up ahead of time, even if it's, you know, coming from various different places. It doesn't have to just be one. If you're, you know, putting together from a local business versus local county funding, state funding, other programs, work on that ahead of time. Gather local and government support letters, so showing that this is important locally as well as with your elected officials. That always carries some weight, that it's important to them and that they're willing to support the project. And as I mentioned with discussing the application, understanding your right-of-way ownership is valuable to building the application, one, because it gives an understanding of where you are with the project, but also avoiding any hurdles in the future of moving forward. And there are existing tools to helping you with some of these items. There's bikeability and walkability checklists. There's Safe Routes to School area assessment forms and school observation assessment forms to kind of help you build your application as well. So utilizing some of the tools out there might help you build that comprehensive plan. Complete school traffic safety reviews using some of those checklists that I mentioned. Being able to provide a plan and concepts, mapping, photos, any support information to build your story, to build support for the need for this project is going to be valuable to showing why this project is more important than other projects that are asking for funding. For education pieces, if you're asking for funding for education, be specific about what type of education, whether it's events or materials, what you're planning to do with that, when you're planning to give it out, how that's beneficial, because they're going to be looking for not just you want to buy 500 coloring books, but when are you going to be giving that out? Is that coupled with another activity or event? And that can be useful for their reporting and invoicing as well, because you want to be able to tie the activity that and the funding that you're requesting to an actual trackable item when you're asking for reimbursement, and understanding when they're going to be able to expect you to expend those funds is important. So include time frames, schools, classes, what level of involvement you're planning to accommodate. Enforcement. If you have any data, whether it's incident data or local data from your police department, data that this is truly an area where police presence would be valuable. I guess you could include anything if you think that there's a big crime issue, because their presence could be assisting with that as well. any data that you can have that kind of supports the need for law enforcement versus it's just a positive thing to have. And it, obviously any law enforcement presence you can have is valuable, but is it more valuable than the other projects that are submitted? So any data you can include is beneficial to you. And the last two I have are funding for a coordinator and procurement requirements. So funding for a coordinator has changed. The support for that has changed over time. It really just depends on who's in the administration, who's making the decisions for funding, who the administrator of state highway is, who the secretary of transportation is. And overall, this is a fundable, eligible component of the program, and they are willing to look, and state highway is willing to look at applications for this need. But what I would suggest and highly recommend is that you have a plan. What are your specific expectations for this person? What activities do you expect them to do? Are they going to host a walk and bike to school day event? Are they going to do bike rodeos? What are they going to really be doing? What schools are they going to be working for? Are there tasks that they can complete? And sure, this will not necessarily accommodate every hour of, there's coordination involved, there's research involved, and talking to local businesses or whoever they're partnering with. But in general, what is the plan for this coordinator? That there's some thought ahead of time of what this person will be doing, so that when they are hired, they can get started and there is already a game plan for what they will be trying to accomplish. Have a reasonable salary request. Part of this could be considering if you're just starting off this option or this opportunity, working with someone part-time just to kind of get things flowing versus having someone full-time, because some of these efforts can take some time to get started. Those are just some suggestions. You do not have to necessarily do part-time. You can request a full-time position, but just make sure that it's reasonable with your game plan and that those pieces and components make sense together. The last piece is procurement requirements. So federal procurement requirements are, something that have to be followed, whether you're hiring assistants for planning, design, coordinator, educational instructors. You will have to follow a process. And again, as I mentioned before, it's very important that you work with the program manager or the federal aid or the federal aid programming division to make sure that you're following that process. And they may even have someone from their procurement office involved, but I'm not sure where they stand at this moment with resources for there. But either way, they have to help you and they have to provide that approval. So just make sure that you are not jumping the gun and starting things without having the knowledge of what is needed ahead of time. And the same thing for bidding for construction activities. You will have to put that project on eMaryland Marketplace. So knowing that this is how you're going to have to move forward. And there is a small procurement, so things under $25,000 can fall under small procurement, which means that the procurement, whether you're purchasing materials and coloring books or bike racks or what have you, they do fall under a slightly easier and less cumbersome activity, process and procedure. So just understanding what that means. Once you hit that threshold, there are further requirements when you're above $25,000. Just really important that you understand the procurement responsibilities. Again, I can't stress that enough because there have been sponsors that move forward thinking that they could just buy what they needed or what they, the helmets they wanted, or they could, without getting 3 bids and getting that approved first, or maybe they've moved forward and had to, they put it in their local newspaper that they need someone to build sidewalks, and they've had to stop what they're doing, go back and halt their project months at a time to get the approvals they need and redo the advertisement appropriately and according to the federal requirements. So it's just important to know that ahead of time. And then in general, the Safe Routes School Partnership asks that I kind of mention what some projects are that have been awarded in the past. And for infrastructure, it's been your usual sidewalk, curb and gutter, ADA, ramp improvements that address compliance with ADA and Americans with Disabilities Act. At times there have been traffic signals and crosswalk countdowns, and there have been a few walkability audits, not many, but there were maybe 1 or 2 that were approved. There hasn't been a whole lot requested, so that's usually what comes in, and that's kind of typically the gamut of what gets approved. For non-infrastructure, they have funded specific events and activities like walk and bike to school day and handouts for that, whether it be water bottles or backpacks, pencils, different things to hand out to the children. Tacoma Park has been very successful with an I Can Shine bike camp, which is a camp that not only may teach children with disabilities how to ride a bike, but also how to do it safely and giving them confidence and understanding the skills that they need to be safe. There are giveaways and educational material handouts, whether that's printing material, as I said, or T-shirts, helmets, safety things. There's a wide gamut of those. There's many companies out there that are focused on what, pamphlets and booklets of what that could be, and zip ties, all kinds of different reflector items. So just depends on what you would want to do. And then some bike rodeos have been funded in the past. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation. Here's a list of additional resources that could assist you with either ideas on what to apply for, how to get started, what the requirements are once you have been awarded federal funding. There's some different manuals out there, as well as the Federal Highway website. So these could be very valuable resources to you. And with that, I am finished, and I believe we'll be open to questions.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that comprehensive presentation. And as she mentioned, we're now in the questions and answer portion of our webinar. Thank you all for the questions you have already submitted, but keep them coming if you want. So I guess, Jessica, the first question for you is there a maximum amount of funding that districts can apply for through Safe Routes to School?
No, there is not a minimum or a maximum requirement. What has always been kind of suggested for a minimum is for construction projects, for your larger items, is $100,000. If you're doing some smaller educational pieces, you fall under small procurement. That doesn't apply necessarily, but because of some of the approvals and the design requirements, if you're building a sidewalk, doing stormwater management, there's kind of a minimum suggested, but it's not required, and there's no maximum. So what I would suggest is just keep in mind how much funding is available, but it can't hurt to ask. They can always tell you no.
Okay, great, thanks. And how about average length of Safe Routes to School grants? Is there a maximum or minimum? The average length, yeah, of the grants. Is it a 1-year project, a 2-year project?
Oh, I understand. Okay. Usually they like to see the project come to fruition within 2 years. That's usually what they have on their MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that you'll be required to sign as an applicant and an awardee. And but that might be less time if it's, an annual event, a walk to school day event, educational materials. They might pull that back to maybe within that school year. But overall, if it's a construction project, then it's 2 years to bring it to advertisement.
Okay, great.
Or has been in the past.
Okay. Can a grant request include only the purchase of equipment, such as bike racks and signs, but not the installation, or does it need to include purchase and installation?
It can include only what you need. So if you only need the bike rack and you have someone that's able to install it, then you do not need to apply for that. You just apply for whatever it is that the services that you need.
Okay. Now, our professional assistance costs that you mentioned for the development of a grant application, can those be covered under Safe Routes to School or no?
Not for the application. So you're only able to be reimbursed, because it is a reimbursable program, for activities that have happened after you've been awarded the project and after you've signed a memorandum of understanding. So funding that you've put up, that you've expended prior to that process occurring, is cost that you would incur on your own. But again, my thought is that, in conversations I've had with some counties and other agencies, is that might be a small cost that you can put up front and maybe cost a couple $1,000s, but might be able to get you $1 million in funding for a project that's very needed or valuable to you. So although it might come out of pocket early, overall you may be able to have a better success rate and more funding awarded to you in the long run.
Yeah, and also just for our participants, we'll also be distributing as a follow-up a list of state grant application writers within either your county's Department of Transportation or your county's Department of Education. They're always great resources because they do this for a living and they do it every day. So if they can't do the writing per se and the development of the grant application, they can certainly be great resources of how to put a grant application together. So let's see. Our next question is, and I don't know if you're going to be able to comment on this, but just thought I would post it to you. Has the Regional Intermodal Planning Division and the Procurement Office finalized the approval process required for an on-call designer to do design work for Safe Routes to School?
That is a great question, and they should have a process that is approved. Now, whether they have something that's bulleted out that they can give to you, I don't know that for sure, but there should be, it should be a fairly common question for folks, because I know with Safe Routes to School, a lot of times if you have a school, they don't have the engineering capabilities and consulting resources, so they need to hire folks. So they should be able to give you that process of what is required, because it's something they typically work with every day. But I can't say whether they have something that they could email out or put it on their website. I don't know.
Okay, we can also follow up from our end with State Highway Administration, with colleagues at the State Highway Administration. Then let's see. Now you mentioned how many times districts or communities underestimate their projects. So what happens if that? What happens in that case? You already received your grant application, your grant approval, and you're starting to implement the project, and you realize that it did go, perhaps not as extreme as from 50,000 to 200,000, but it went from 50,000 to 75. What happens in those situations?
So there's a few things that could happen when they're evaluating the application. They could potentially decide to award you more funding than you asked for, because they already are acknowledging that you didn't include the cost of stormwater management, or you didn't include the cost of, maybe they went on site, because sometimes they will do site evaluations when they get the application to really verify whether how viable the project is and whether the right things were included. So sometimes during that process they'll say, oh, they missed 2 additional ramps, and that usually equates to X amount, so we'll give them the extra, I don't know, 10 grand or something like that. So that's one potential thing that could happen. Another is that it's underfunded, and the applicant will have to come up with the additional funding. They could ask for additional funding from State Highway Administration, and that usually goes through a whole approval process, and it usually depends on how much money is available versus how much they need to expend that year, how much you're actually asking for. Is it 2% more than the cost you are award, or is it 25%? Like, how far off were you? How much money do you need to make this come to fruition? So there's a couple different components that could happen, and another unfortunate component could be that it kind of ends the project, that it's not fundable at that point, or not able to move forward, or you're only able to move forward with a piece of it versus the whole project that you're expecting to move forward. So that could be an unfortunate circumstance as well.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Now, and then there's this question that we received is not necessarily directly related with Safe Routes to School, although it can impact. Do you know what is the status of SHA's restoring funding to Fund 79 for new sidewalk construction for pedestrian access?
Unfortunately, I do not know the status of that.
Okay, and we'll follow up for our registrants and participant who has that question. We'll follow up with the SHA and provide some feedback on that question. Okay. All right. So I think we have actually neared the end of our quick Q&A portion. For those of you that have asked, yes, the PowerPoint presentation will be available for download. We'll also upload it to our regional website along with the recording of the webinar. We're also going to be, excuse me, there we go. We're also going to be sending you a quick survey and would love to hear your feedback on today's webinar. You do have our contact information, but we'll also share it in our follow-up communication. So if you do think of any other questions that you would like to ask us, or as you're moving along in your application process, please feel free to reach out to us. And with that, all that remains to be said is thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.